Hunk is one of the most feared operatives in Resident Evil history, a man nicknamed the Grim Reaper because everyone around him dies and he just keeps walking. But his story isn't told through cutscenes or boss fights, it's buried in classified documents, hidden unlockables, and blink and you miss it details scattered across decades of games. So today, I'm breaking down every single chapter of Hunk's story, starting with the quietest one, Resident Evil Code, Veronica. Most characters in Resident Evil get their big moments through explosions or dramatic cutscenes. Hunk gets his through a single piece of paper, and honestly, that piece of paper does more character work than most games do with hours of gameplay. In Code, Veronica, Hunk never appears on screen. You never control him. You never even hear his voice. Instead, you find a classified document tucked inside a conference room on Rockford Island called Hunk's Report. If you're not actively searching for files, you'll walk right past it. But here's the thing. This report is one of the most revealing moments in Hunk's entire history. The document is dated late 1998. That's just weeks after Hunk walked out of Raccoon City as the sole survivor of his entire squad. The report details a cargo mission where Hunk successfully delivered a large-scale BOW capsule to Rockford Island. After passing through 108 checkpoint inspections, the man is nothing if not thorough. But the real value isn't the mission itself. It's what Hunk admits between the lines. He's confused. He openly questions why the USS is being used for cargo transport instead of the special missions they were designed for. And then he says something you almost never hear from this character. He's worried. Hunk states that without knowing what's inside the capsule, his team can't properly prepare for potential dangers. This is a man who survived Raccoon City alone, and he's nervous about going in blind on a delivery run. That's worth paying attention to. And then there's the ending. Hunk closes the report by referencing the good old days in the military training center. That single sentence confirms Rockford Island is where Hunk was originally trained back in 1996. He's standing in the same facility where his career began, running missions he doesn't fully understand for an organization that's clearly cracking at the seams. The mysterious cargo is never identified in canon, but its connection to the Ashford family's bioweapon research points toward the T. Veronica virus, the very thing that would burn Rockford Island to the ground just weeks later. Hunk delivered something to the place where he was born as a soldier, and that something may have helped destroy it. But if you think a quiet document is the most intense chapter of Hunk's story, wait until you see what happened to him in Raccoon City. Resident Evil 2. Here's where Hunk's legend actually begins. Not in a cutscene, not in a flashback, in a minigame that most players almost missed entirely. The fourth survivor drops you into Raccoon City on September 30th, 1998. The T-virus outbreak is at its absolute peak. Every member of Alpha Team is dead. Hunk's last companion, Goblin 6, bled out that morning from injuries sustained fighting the mutated Dr. William Birkin, the G-creature. So Hunk is completely alone, sitting in the sewers beneath a city that's already a corpse, clutching a G-virus sample that Umbrella will do anything to recover. And the game gives you almost nothing to work with. 150 handgun bullets, 15 shotgun shells, 8 magnum rounds, 2 mixed herbs. That's it. The scarcity is the point. This isn't a victory lap. This is a desperate extraction from a war zone that's about to get wiped off the map. You fight through zombie-infested waterways, infected dogs, sewer creatures, and then a direct encounter with a T-103 tyrant near the police station. Every room drains your resources. Every hallway is a calculation. And the whole time, you're pushing toward the rooftop where extraction helicopter Nighthawk is supposed to be waiting. Supposed to be, because when Hunk finally reaches the extraction point, Nighthawk abandons it. Incoming military ordnance is closing in on Raccoon City, and the pilot pulls out. Here's where it gets interesting. Hunk doesn't beg. He doesn't panic. He tells Nighthawk to leave without him. His exact words: "This is war. Survival is your responsibility." That's not a soldier asking for rescue. That's a professional accepting death as a valid outcome. But the pilot comes back anyway, and when he does, he drops maybe the best line in the entire franchise. He says he wanted to meet the Grim Reaper. That exchange is the closest thing Hunk has to a friendship in this entire series. One moment of mutual respect between two professionals who understand exactly what they're risking, and then it's over. Now, the title itself. The fourth survivor works on two levels that most Western players completely miss. On the surface, Hunk is the fourth known survivor of Raccoon City, alongside Leon, Claire, and Sherry. But in Japanese, the number 4 shares its pronunciation with the word for death. So fourth survivor is literally a death pun, a direct nod to his Grim Reaper nickname baked right into the title. And his exit line seals everything. The death cannot die. It's not a boast. It's not celebration. It's a mission statement from a man who just lost his entire team, fought through a dead city with barely enough ammo to survive, and completed the objective anyway. He's not happy about it. He's just done what he always does. That's the foundation. Every single thing the franchise builds on Hunk starts right here in these sewers. But Umbrella Chronicles would later revisit this exact escape and expand it in ways the original never could. Resident Evil, The Umbrella Chronicles. Here's where Hunk stops being a desperate man running for his life and becomes something closer to a legend. The Umbrella Chronicles is a light gun anthology game that covers the biggest events in the Resident Evil franchise. Mansion Incident, Raccoon City, the fall of Umbrella, major franchise-defining moments. And sitting right alongside all of that is a dedicated scenario called Fourth Survivor, built entirely around Hunk's escape from Raccoon City. Let that sink in. Capcom looked at every story they could tell from this universe, and decided that one guy extracting a virus sample was important enough to stand next to the destruction of an entire city. The scenario drops you into the early hours of September 30th, 1998. Same day, Hunk loses Goblin 6. Same day, everything falls apart. But instead of the tight corridors and careful resource management from the original Resident Evil 2 minigame, you're now blasting through swampland, contaminated waterways, and heavily infested urban zones with devastating firepower. The on-rail shooter mechanics completely reframe who Hunk is. In the original, he felt fragile, desperate. One wrong turn, and you're dead. Here, he feels like a force of nature. Same man, same events, completely different energy, and honestly, both readings are valid, but the real genius of Fourth Survivor isn't the action, it's the noise. Throughout the entire scenario, Hunk's radio picks up ambient crosstalk from across Raccoon City, police officers making desperate calls for backup that nobody's sending, civilians screaming for help into frequencies that nobody's monitoring, organizational communications confirming total social collapse. Every transmission paints the picture of a city in its final hours, and Hunk is just one thread inside that catastrophe, threading a needle through the end of everything, and then he delivers the line that explains more about Hunk's psychology than most characters get in entire games. Mission accomplished. The survival rate was 4% and valuable human resources were lost, but that is war. The mission objective takes priority over everything else. Holding to that principle is why I have never failed a mission. Read that again. A 4% survival rate. He's not mourning the 96% who died. He's not questioning whether the mission was worth it. He's stating with absolute clarity that this is exactly how it's supposed to work. The objective comes first. Always. That's not cruelty. That's philosophy. And it's the closest the franchise ever gets to Hunk actually explaining himself. The scenario ends with Nighthawk's return, and this time, Capcom gives it real cinematic weight. What was a mechanical extraction beat in the original becomes something genuinely emotional here. The pilot who was told to leave comes back anyway. Not because of protocol, not because of orders, because of loyalty between two professionals who understand what the other one is. The Umbrella Chronicles quietly argues that Hunk's legend isn't just about surviving, it's about being the kind of operator who inspires people to risk everything for him, even when he tells them not to. Same escape, same city, same man, but the Umbrella Chronicles turns it into something operatic. But if you think Hunk's Raccoon City story ends with one retelling, wait until you see what happens when an entirely different team rewrites the whole thing from scratch. Resident Evil, Operation Raccoon City. Here's the thing about Operation Raccoon City. It's not canon. Everyone knows that. But it's the only time we ever see Hunk doing something he almost never does in any other appearance. He's not running. He's not surviving. He's commanding. This is Hunk as a leader. Alpha Team is breaching Nest to retrieve the G-Virus from Dr. William Birkin, and Delta Team, the Wolf Pack, has been sent in as backup. Hunk is the one calling the shots, coordinating multiple squads in a live combat zone against US military spec ops, Birkin's hired security, and eventually Birkin himself. It's the closest we ever get to seeing him at the top of Umbrella's operational food chain, and honestly, he fits there perfectly. His briefing to the Wolfpack is the most direct mission statement he's ever delivered in any game. We're entering the lab of Dr. William Birkin, an Umbrella scientist attempting to sell classified samples of a weaponized virus strain to the US government. Intercept Birkin and secure the G-virus. Failure is not an option. No ambiguity. No hesitation. Just cold, clean operational clarity. In Heroes mode, Hunk becomes a playable villain character, and his toolkit tells you everything about how Umbrella designed him to operate. Proximity detection expands his minimap and reveals enemies within 10 to 20 meters. Active camouflage cloaks him for up to 20 seconds. Stealth run increases his movement speed while reducing his footstep audio to nearly nothing. And sonar vision sends out a pulse that reveals targets through walls up to 60 meters away. He's built as a ghost. You don't hear him, you don't see him, and by the time you realize he's there, it's already over. His signature brutal kill reinforces this. He kicks the target's knee out from under them, then slits their throat. Quick, efficient, zero wasted motion. That's not flashy violence. That's someone who has killed so many times that every movement has been stripped down to pure function. No theatrics, no hesitation, just the fastest possible path between alive and dead. That's the Grim Reaper in a nutshell. But here's where it gets really interesting. A psychological evaluation file was released through the game's viral marketing campaign. It's a brief document from a doctor assigned to assess Hunk's mental state. The evaluation notes that Hunk appears to have no human side whatsoever, that any personal identity seems to have been completely erased by his operational conditioning. Standard stuff for a guy nicknamed the Grim Reaper. But then there's one line that changes everything. The evaluating doctor notes that Hunk seems to respond to the name Bella. That's it. The doctor couldn't determine who Bella is. Couldn't figure out the relationship. No follow-up. No resolution. Just a single crack in the armor of the most emotionally impenetrable character in Resident Evil history. Nobody knows who Bella is. A partner, a daughter, a sister, someone he lost, someone he's protecting. The franchise has never explained it, and honestly, it might never explain it. But the fact that a name, just a name, can make Hunk react like a human being after everything we've seen him endure. That one detail haunts the community more than any virus or mutation ever could. Yes, Operation Raccoon City isn't canon, but certain elements, like Hunk's leadership role, the mission structure, and especially that psychological evaluation, align closely enough with mainline events that the community treats them as plausible reflections of what actually happened. And the Bella detail? Canon or not, it's the most human moment Hunk has ever had, which makes his next appearance feel even stranger because, in Revelations, he's back to being a total ghost. Resident Evil Revelations. After the intensity of Operation Raccoon City, Hunk's next appearances dial things back in a way that actually tells us more about him than any psych evaluation ever could. In Resident Evil Revelations, Hunk shows up in Raid Mode, a co-op experience that lets players tear through campaign locations with unlockable characters. And true to form, you don't just get Hunk handed to you, you earn him. Specific achievement conditions or DLC purchase. That's been the pattern since 1998. He's always a reward, never a default, but here's what makes his Revelations version fascinating. His entire mechanical identity is built around one philosophy: never stop shooting. Machine gun reload speed boosted by 100%, firing rate increased by 45%, weapon masteries that stack on top of those passives. Hunk in Revelations isn't a precision sniper or a careful resource manager. He's a sustained firepower machine designed to suppress everything in front of him until nothing is left standing. And then there's his signature passive ability. It's called Shadow Dancer, and the description says it makes him even easier to dodge attacks. Think about that for a second. His survival ability isn't extra health. It's not damage resistance. It's not a shield. It's evasion. The implication is clear. Hunk doesn't survive because he's hard to kill. He survives because he's almost impossible to hit in the first place. That reframes everything we know about the Grim Reaper. Every mission where he walked out as the sole survivor. Every impossible extraction. Every time someone asked how he did it. The answer might just be that nothing could touch him. The game also introduces Lady Hunk, a female counterpart who mirrors Hunk's combat style, unlocked through separate conditions. Official sources say absolutely nothing about who she is. The fan community has theories, none of them are confirmed, she exists, she fights like Hunk, and that's all anyone actually knows. But the real gem here is a raid mode dialogue exchange. Rachel tells Hunk she's happy to work with Dr. Death. His response? You wouldn't be if you knew how I got that name. Let that sit. He's not bragging. He's not being mysterious for the sake of it. He's genuinely warning her. Whatever earned him that title, it's something darker than anything the franchise has actually shown us. And Hunk knows it. He's fully aware that his reputation is built on something people don't actually want to know about. Revelations 2 continues the trend, featuring Hunk as a playable addition with a consistent mechanical profile. By this point in the franchise, his inclusion isn't a surprise. It's expected. He's become the recurring figure who shows up in the margins of other people's stories, always playable, always deadly, always keeping whatever's behind that gas mask completely hidden. But if Revelations kept Hunk in the margins, the next game put him front and center in a way nobody saw coming. Resident Evil 4. By 2003, Umbrella is gone, dissolved, every subsidiary gutted, every executive either dead or in hiding. And Hunk, he's still working. No corporate handler, no USS designation, no extraction team on standby, just a mercenary operating purely on reputation and skill. And Resident Evil 4 is where you finally get to see what that looks like at full power. Hunk shows up in Mercenaries mode alongside Leon Kennedy, Louis Serra, and Jack Krauser, but he's not just another character on the roster. He's the last one you unlock. You have to achieve rank A or higher while playing as Krauser, which means hitting a minimum score of 100,000 points. That's not a casual afternoon. That's the game telling you that you need to earn the right to play as this guy. And his loadout reflects exactly who he's become. The LE-5 submachine gun with penetration power and scope compatibility, a boot knife for close quarters work, hand grenades, first aid spray, no corporate issue heavy weapons, no experimental umbrella tech. Everything is adaptable, portable, and lethal. This is a man who travels light because he doesn't need anything else, but the real showcase is his combat. Hunk's defining melee technique is the neck breaker, and it's exactly as brutal as it sounds. A spinning back fist destabilizes the approaching enemy, and then he snaps their neck instantly. One motion, the body drops, and the force pushes surrounding threats backward. Against common ganados, it's a one-move cleanup. Skilled players turn the entire Mercenaries experience into a loop. Headshot to stun, neckbreaker to eliminate, repeat. It's almost rhythmic. Almost beautiful in the most violent way possible. Then there's Mayhem mode. Press both sticks simultaneously, and Hunk gets unlimited ammunition until the gauge empties. It is genuinely overpowered against the right enemies. Hordes of ganados in the village stage evaporate. But here's the thing. The discipline isn't knowing when to use it. The discipline is knowing when not to. Burn it early on weak enemies, and you got nothing left when the Chainsaw Man shows up. That restraint is very Hunk. He absolutely dominates the village stage. The open sight lines, the clustered enemies, the terrain that funnels targets into his neckbreaker range. It's his playground. But the castle and island environments, that's where the Grim Reaper hits a wall. Garradors are immune to melee execution. Completely immune. You cannot neckbreak something that has no exposed vulnerability. Shield-carrying ganados repel SMG fire entirely, turning his primary weapon into a noisemaker. For the first time in the game, Hunk has to improvise. The hand grenades become essential. Area denial, shield bypass, crowd control. The game is quietly making a point here. Even Mr. Death has a ceiling. And his answer to that ceiling is explosives, which, honestly, is very on brand. His character file in the game explicitly labels him Mr. Death and Grim Reaper Hunk, and includes a detail that most players skip right past. It notes his rivalry with UBCS Sergeant Nikolai Zinoviev, not a rivalry within Umbrella's internal structure, a rivalry that crossed organizational lines. The UBCS was a completely separate division from the USS. They had different command structures, different objectives, different operational philosophies, and Nikolai, a man whose entire job description involves surviving impossible missions for a competing branch, considered Hunk his rival. That means Hunk's legend wasn't just internal. It wasn't just USS soldiers whispering about the Grim Reaper in barracks hallways. People whose literal job was to compete against USS operatives knew his name and measured themselves against him. That's not just a reputation, that's a legacy. And it followed him long after Umbrella stopped signing the checks. But if Resident Evil 4 showed Hunk at his peak, the Resident Evil 2 remake was about to remind everyone where that peak started. Resident Evil 2 Remake. In 1998, the fourth survivor was a tense, stripped down gauntlet. A handgun, a shotgun, a magnum, 2 herbs, and a prayer. You moved fast, you conserved ammo, and you hoped for the best. It was brilliant for its time, but it was a mechanical exercise. The presentation was minimal. The story was a few text boxes and a radio crackle. In 2019, Capcom rebuilt the entire thing from the ground up. And the difference is staggering. The remake's version of the fourth survivor doesn't just look better, it feels completely different. Hunk's loadout alone tells you how much the design philosophy shifted. You're carrying an LE-5 submachine gun, a W870 shotgun, the Lightning Hawk Magnum, 100 SMG rounds, 6 shotgun shells, 6 Magnum rounds, a first aid spray, multiple mixed herbs, a combat knife, 3 hand grenades, and 3 flash grenades. That sounds like overkill. It's not, because the original scarcity problem has been replaced by something arguably worse: sheer suffocating volume. The scenario opens the same way it always has. Hunk emerges from the sewer network. He's the last man standing from Alpha Team. Everyone else is dead. He's carrying a single G-Virus sample, and the mission parameters haven't changed. Get to the roof. Get extracted. Walk through hell to do it. But now you feel every step of that walk. The enemy density in the remake is relentless. Zombie hordes stack up in narrow corridors. Infected dogs come at you from angles you can't cover. Sewer creatures drag you into fights you can't afford. And then there's a direct tyrant encounter layered on top of all of it, with a ticking clock pressuring every decision you make. The goal isn't puzzle solving anymore, it's visceral overwhelm. The game wants you to feel like this escape should not be survivable, and the narrative stakes have been raised to match. The remake explicitly establishes that US government forces have ordered Raccoon City's complete destruction via missile bombardment. Hunk isn't just racing zombies. He's racing a military deadline with a hard endpoint. If he doesn't reach that rooftop in time, there's nothing left to extract. But here's where the remake really separates itself from the original. The radio exchanges with Nighthawk are now fully scripted and cinematically directed. These aren't text boxes anymore, they're scenes. When Hunk tells Nighthawk, "This is war. Survival is your responsibility," you hear what it costs him to say it. The voice acting carries weight the original simply couldn't deliver. You understand that Hunk isn't being cold, he's being practical. He's telling his pilot to survive because he genuinely doesn't know if he'll make it himself. And then Nighthawk comes back anyway. When Hunk asks why, the pilot says, "I wanted to meet the Grim Reaper." In 1998, that was a line of text. A cool moment, sure. But in 2019, it's a fully realized cinematic scene. The helicopter descending through smoke. The relief in Nighthawk's voice masked by sarcasm. And the real difference is that you understand now what the Grim Reaper actually is. You've been playing him. You've felt what it takes to earn that name. So when someone risks their life just to meet the person behind the legend, it hits completely different. The remake is the first time a modern audience gets Hunk as a fully realized character. Not a minigame curiosity, not a bonus mode afterthought. Everything, the graphics, the voice acting, the sound design, the enemy encounters, works together to make this escape feel genuinely impossible. And that's the point. Hunk's legend only works if you believe he shouldn't have survived. The remake makes you believe it. This is the version that introduced Hunk to an entire generation of players who never touched the original. For millions of people, the 2019 Fourth Survivor is Hunk's defining moment. It's the reason his name carries weight. It's the reason people care about where he shows up next. And where he shows up next changes everything. Resident Evil 9 Requiem, February 2026. Leon Kennedy is fighting his way out of an underground ARC facility, and standing between him and the exit is a masked figure Capcom calls the Commander. Military-grade gas mask, red lenses, combat stance that looks like it was pulled directly from a Mercenaries mode highlight reel. No introduction, no monologue. just violence. And then he snaps Leon's neck. If you've watched this entire video, you know exactly what that move means. That neck snap isn't just a boss attack, it's Hunk's signature execution. The move that has defined his combat identity since Resident Evil 4's Mercenaries mode, the move that players have replicated thousands of times across multiple games, and now it's showing up as a finishing technique in a mainline Resident Evil entry, performed by a masked stranger who fights like a ghost from 1998. But the neck snap is just the beginning. When the commander lands that kill, move on Leon, he delivers a single line, Leon S. Kennedy. We finally meet. He knows Leon's full name. He knows what Raccoon City means. He says finally like he's been waiting for this moment across an entire franchise timeline. This isn't a random encounter with a facility guard. This is someone with history, someone who has been watching from the other side of the series for decades and chose this exact moment to step out of the shadows. Now let's stack the evidence because it piles up fast. The voice. Keith Silverstein delivers the commander's dialogue. The same Keith Silverstein who voiced Hunk in the RE2 remake, the RE4 remake Mercenaries mode, and multiple other appearances stretching back years. Capcom didn't bring in a new actor. They didn't even try to disguise the casting. They brought back the exact same person, gave him the exact same vocal cadence, and let the audience draw their own conclusions. That's not a coincidence. That's a creative decision made by people who understand what continuity signals to an audience that has been paying attention for nearly 3 decades. The game files. Data miners pulled apart Requiem's code and found the boss fight labeled internally as Old Hunk Battle. Not Commander Fight, not Masked Boss, not Arc Leader Encounter, Old Hunk Battle. That's either a developer confirmation buried in the source code or the most elaborate red herring in franchise history. And honestly, both options are fascinating. But the word old is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. It implies age. It implies this is someone who has been doing this for a very long time. It implies the original, not a copy, the weapon. After you defeat the commander, you obtain the Mortal Edge. Its item description reads that the weapon has taken countless lives and is steeped in a long, bloody history. The franchise's nickname for Hunk is the Grim Reaper, a weapon steeped in death and long, bloody history belonging to a character known as the Grim Reaper. The parallels are not subtle. Capcom is practically winking at the camera while nudging you in the ribs. The boss fight itself. The entire encounter emphasizes parry mechanics and evasive movement, a combat philosophy that mirrors Hunk's gameplay identity across every single appearance he's ever had. He's never been a tank. He's never been about brute force or overwhelming firepower. He's always been about precision, efficiency, and making every movement count. No wasted bullets, no unnecessary risks. The commander fights the exact same way, punishing aggression and rewarding patience in a way that feels deliberately designed to echo Hunk's Mercenaries playstyle. And then there's the disappearing body. After the fight ends and players leave the commander's room, anyone who backtracks finds something deeply familiar. The body is gone. Blood smears on the floor. No corpse, no explanation, no trail leading anywhere. Hunk has pulled this exact move before. Survive what shouldn't be survivable, then vanish before anyone can confirm the outcome. Whether this is literal escape or narrative shorthand for he's Hunk, of course he's not dead is the question the game absolutely refuses to answer. But here's where it gets complicated, because there is a counter theory, and it deserves serious consideration. Some fans argue that Grim Reaper might not be a personal identity at all. It could be a transferable title, an organizational role that successor agencies assign to their best operatives. Train them in Hunk's documented combat methodology. Give them the mask, give them the moves, teach them the neck snap. The commander could be a successor, a clone, a student who inherited the legend without being the legend. Maybe Hunk died years ago and someone picked up the gas mask and kept going. Capcom has provided zero clarification, and the ambiguity feels completely intentional. They want this debate, they built the game to fuel it. Here's the thing. The game never confirms the commander is Hunk. It also never denies it. Every single piece of evidence, the voice, the fighting style, the dialogue, the internal file name, the weapon description, the disappearing body, points in one direction, and the franchise steps right up to the line without crossing it. It gives you everything except the words, "This is Hunk, which, if you've been following this character since 1998, is exactly what you'd expect. This is a character who has spent nearly 3 decades existing in the margins of one of gaming's biggest franchises, no face, no real name, no definitive answers about where he came from or where he goes after the mission ends. He shows up, completes the objective, survives what should kill him, and disappears into nothing. That's not a flaw in the writing. That's the writing. The mystery is the character. The moment you explain Hunk is the moment a hunk stops working. And Resident Evil 9 Requiem just added another chapter to a story that refuses to be finished. Because "the death cannot die" isn't just a cool line, Hunk said while escaping Raccoon City. It's the most accurate description anyone has ever given this character. Every game tries to close the book on him. Every game fails. The body is always gone. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.